Joining me live now to discuss the latest in global news is foreign editor at the Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, thank you very much for joining us today.
Julia, great to be with you.
I just want to start, of course, on the Israeli Prime Minister's trip to Washington for talks with Donald Trump. We saw that really drawn-out media conference a short time ago. How likely is it that a ceasefire could be achieved here?
Well, I thought there was a lot of choreography and almost pantomime in that encounter. You've got to admire Netanyahu. His nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize is exactly what Trump wants to hear. Very unlikely the Nobel Committee would ever give it to Trump. But Netanyahu is a world-class Trump whisperer. We might get a ceasefire, but the real question is what is the long-term Israeli plan for Gaza? Everyone is insisting on Israeli withdrawal. I don't think that's necessarily the best idea, because if Israel withdraws, Hamas comes back into power, you've got all the devastation that Gaza has suffered, and yet you'll just resume the old military problems, and Israel will still be reluctant to let aid get through. Similarly, I can't see any Arab peacekeeping force really working. Would Arab peacekeepers shoot Palestinian terrorists to stop them attacking Israel? These are insoluble problems. It may be that some kind of quasi-Israeli administration with some local clans or warlords within Gaza is going to emerge, but we really have no idea, partly because the Israelis haven't told us what their medium-term plan for Gaza is. If they get all the hostages back tomorrow, we still don't know what their plan is for Gaza.
And you heard in that meeting over that table this morning that Benjamin Netanyahu, had a lot of strength when he was talking about the conflict. Does that mean that he doesn't see a two-state solution as possible? Is that what you see as possible?
Well, look, I think all of this talk about a two-state solution is just baloney anyway. I mean, Netanyahu in the past has supported a two-state solution, no doubt. The ideal for Israel doesn't want to be ruling a couple of million of Palestinians. The ideal for Israel would be a Palestinian state which lived in peace and posed no security threat to Israel. But every time they've got near to a negotiation, the terrorism has amped up, and the Palestinians have on 4 occasions formally rejected the most generous offer that Israel could possibly make in terms of territory and conditions and so forth. Now, I think you must have a period of normalisation before you get two states. You can't imagine that Israel says, OK, that's fine, we'll withdraw from Gaza now, Hamas can come back and we'll make it an independent state so that in a few years it can accumulate weapons and do October 7 all over again. You're going to have a period, probably 5 or 10 years, where things are normal. And, if the Palestinians would give the Israelis 5 minutes of normality, I'm sure the Israelis would give the Palestinians a state. But the extremists in the Palestinian camp are so visceral in their hatred of Israel and their hatred of Jews. I mean, rank anti-Semitism resides at the very heart of the Hamas Charter, that's just not possible. So I think all the talk of a two-state solution, it's the long-term answer, but, long-term is a long, long way away.
We'll have to wait to see whether that ceasefire can be achieved and then whether it holds. On the Nobel Peace Prize nomination, any weight in it?
I don't think so. I can't imagine that committee ever giving Trump a Nobel Peace Prize, but he certainly has done more than a lot of other people who have earned the Peace Prize. It used to be a joke that, a conflict could survive one Peace Prize, but if it had 2, it would certainly never be solved. And, Henry Kissinger won the Peace Prize in Vietnam, and a minute later the North Vietnamese army slaughtered South Vietnam and put a huge percentage of their population in re-education camps. Trump, certainly for the Abraham Accords in his first term, deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, much more than Barack Obama did, who got it at the beginning of his first term when he'd done absolutely nothing. But these baubles are all but meaningless, really. It's a sign of Trump's vanity that he would love to get one, and he's tickled pink that someone would nominate him, and nobody, it's hard to imagine the Nobel Peace Prize, anybody that they would be less likely to take advice from than Benjamin Netanyahu. That doesn't reflect badly on him, that's just the way it is. So I think this is a bit of the theatre of Netanyahu managing Trump, and Netanyahu does that very well.
Just while I've got you, Greg, we're about to run out of time, but that John Curtin speech that the Prime Minister made over the weekend, Australia having the confidence and determination to think and act for ourselves, is that a declaration of independence from the US in your view?
Look, I thought it was a bizarre speech which you can only interpret as domestic politics. It was historically inaccurate. All kinds of things about it historically were wrong. The key thing about Curtin was that he did everything he could to get America and Britain involved in Australian security, and he understood that America was the key to a secure Australia in Southeast Asia, displacing the Japanese, and he'd been worried about the Japanese long before World War II. Now, if Albanese was going to behave like Curtin, he would be talking up the risks to our security, he would be talking up the need to get defence capability for ourselves, and he would be doing everything he can to secure an American presence in our country. And then finally, to talk about being more independent from the US when we have this pitiful defence budget, we can't even afford missile defence or demining vehicles or our own satellites or anything else. We've got the most decrepit navy we've ever had, can barely put to sea. For Albanese to talk big about independence, I thought it was the most bizarre speech of Albanese's life so far, and in direct contradiction of everything that John Curtin actually stood for and achieved as a wartime leader for Australia.
Thanks so much for your insights. Foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Julia.